Love history? Subscribe and explore the stories that shaped our world.
To understand the magnitude of Italian unification, we must first look at the map of the early 1800s. As the Austrian Chancellor Metternich famously remarked in 1847, Italy is a geographical expression. It was a linguistic concept, not a political reality. Since the time of the Roman Empire, this territory had never been united under a single hand. In the mid-19th century, the peninsula was a patchwork of separate states, distinct in their laws, currencies, and economies. To the south lay the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, ruled by the Bourbon dynasty, a land where feudal vestiges remained strong. In the center, the Pope ruled over the Papal States as a temporal monarch. To the north were smaller duchies like Modena, Parma, and Tuscany, alongside the wealthy regions of Lombardy and Venice. However, the shadow of the Austrian Empire loomed over everything. Austria directly controlled the Lombardo-Venetian kingdom and exerted immense influence over the rest of the peninsula, acting as the guarantor of the old order. Economically, the land was disjointed. There was no single market. Instead, customs barriers and poor infrastructure isolated the regions from one another. While the north, particularly Piedmont and Lombardy, was beginning to see the sparks of a capitalist model and industrialization, the south remained largely agrarian and semi-feudal. Yet the memory of Napoleonic times and the winds of liberalism blowing across Europe had planted a seed. The desire for independence from foreign rule, specifically Austrian rule, began to grow. But who would lead this charge?
If Italy was a body waiting to be born, Giuseppe Mazzini was its beating heart. Born in Genoa in 1805, Mazzini was a lawyer, philosopher, and writer who dedicated his life to the idea of a free, united republic. Mazzini began his career in the secret society of the Carbonari, but after being arrested and imprisoned in 1830, he realized that old conspiratorial methods were insufficient. He believed that the liberation of Italy had to be a mass movement, driven by faith and education. In 1831, while in exile in Marseille, he founded Young Italy, Giovine Italia, an organization with the clear goal of a unitary republic. His motto was God and the people. Mazzini believed that national unity was a divine mission and that Italians had a duty to liberate themselves without relying on kings or foreign powers. He famously rejected the idea of a federal system or a monarchy, pushing instead for a centralized democratic republic. The year 1848 marked a turning point. Revolutions swept across Europe, and Italy caught fire. In Milan, the people drove out the Austrian general Radetzky. In Rome, the Pope fled, and a republic was proclaimed under a triumvirate led by Mazzini himself. However, the idealism of 1848 ultimately crashed against the rocks of reality. The Roman Republic fell to French troops in 1849, and the Austrians reasserted control over the north. The revolutionary tactics of Mazzini had failed to secure lasting victory. The movement needed more than just high ideals. It needed an army and a statesman.
Following the collapse of the 1848 revolutions, only one Italian state kept its constitution, the Kingdom of Sardinia, also known as Piedmont. It became the beacon of hope for Italian liberals. The man who would turn this small kingdom into the engine of unification was Count Camillo Benso di Cavour. Taking office as prime minister in 1852, Cavour was the antithesis of Mazzini. He was a pragmatist, a businessman, and a master diplomat. Often called the Italian Bismarck, Cavour believed in reform from above, not revolution from below. Cavour knew that Piedmont was too small to defeat Austria alone. He needed to modernize the state and find powerful allies. Domestically, he built railways, lowered tariffs, and strengthened the banking system, turning Piedmont into the economic leader of the peninsula. Internationally, he played a brilliant game of chess. In 1855, he sent Piedmontese troops to fight in the Crimean War alongside Britain and France. This bold move earned Piedmont a seat at the peace conference in Paris, allowing Cavour to raise the Italian question before the great powers of Europe. His target for an alliance was Napoleon III of France. In 1858, they met secretly at Plombières and hatched a plan. France would help Piedmont drive the Austrians out of Italy. In exchange, Piedmont would cede Nice and Savoy to France. The trap was sprung in 1869. Austria was provoked into declaring war, known as the Second War of Independence. The French and Piedmontese armies won decisive victories at Magenta and Solferino. The result was a wave of enthusiasm across central Italy. Tuscany, Modena, and Parma overthrew their rulers and voted to join Piedmont. By 1860, Cavour had successfully united the north. But the south remained under the grip of the Bourbons. Cavour was cautious, fearing that a move south might provoke international intervention, but the revolutionary spirit could not be contained.
Giuseppe Garibaldi was the sword of unification. A sailor from Nice, he had spent years in exile fighting for independence in South America, where his Italian legion first adopted their iconic red shirts. Unlike the calculating Cavour, Garibaldi was a charismatic warrior who inspired fanatical devotion. In May 1860, insurrection broke out in Sicily. Seeing an opportunity, Garibaldi gathered a volunteer force of about 1,000 men, students, artisans, and idealists. This legendary Expedition of the Thousand departed from Genoa, ostensibly without official government sanction, though Cavour tacitly allowed it while publicly denying involvement. Landing in Marsala on May 11, 1860, Garibaldi faced a Neapolitan army of 25,000 with his ragtag force. At the Battle of Calatafimi, the situation looked dire. His advisors suggested retreat, but Garibaldi famously replied, "Here we make Italy or die." Against all odds, they won. The victory electrified the Sicilian population. Peasants armed with pitchforks joined the red shirts, and they marched on Palermo, taking the capital through sheer audacity and popular support. By September 1860, Garibaldi had crossed to the mainland and entered Naples, the capital of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, as a liberator. The Bourbon army collapsed before him. This success terrified Cavour. He feared Garibaldi might march all the way to Rome, which was protected by French troops, or declare a republic in the south, undermining the Piedmontese monarchy. To prevent this, King Victor Emmanuel II led the Piedmontese army south to intercept Garibaldi. The pivotal moment came at Teano in October 1860. Garibaldi rode out to meet the king. Putting national unity above his republican ideals, Garibaldi hailed Victor Emmanuel II as King of Italy and handed over his conquests. He asked for nothing in return, retiring to his farm on the island of Caprera, having gifted a kingdom to his monarch. On March 17, 1861, the Parliament in Turin proclaimed the creation of the Kingdom of Italy, with Victor Emmanuel II as its first king. It was a monumental achievement. As Cavour stated, "We have created Italy." However, there were glaring omissions. Venice was still held by the Austrians, and Rome remained under the Pope, protected by a French garrison. The Roman question, the conflict between the new state and the papacy, was the most delicate issue of the day. The Pope refused to recognize the new state, and Catholics were effectively forbidden from participating in its politics. Sadly, Cavour died suddenly in June 1861, just months after the kingdom was proclaimed. It fell to his successors to finish the work. Venice was secured in 1866 through the Third War of Independence. Italy allied itself with rising Prussia against Austria. Although the Italian army suffered military setbacks, Prussia's victory forced Austria to cede Venice to Italy. Rome remained the final prize. Garibaldi, impatient with diplomacy, tried twice to take the city by force with volunteers in 1862 and 1867, but was stopped, once by the Italian army itself to avoid war with France, and once by French troops. The resolution finally came in 1870, triggered by events far from Italy. The Franco-Prussian War forced Napoleon III to withdraw his garrison from Rome to fight the Germans. Seizing the moment, Italian troops marched on the Eternal City. On September 20, 1870, they breached the walls at Porta Pia. Rome was annexed and declared the capital of Italy in 1871. The unification was geographically complete. From a geographical expression to a major European power, Italy had been forged through the distinct contributions of its three fathers: Mazzini, the soul; Cavour, the brain; and Garibaldi, the sword. As the politician Massimo d'Azeglio famously said after the unification, "We have made Italy, now we must make Italians."